Hi, this is Yavi Caro, and welcome to the Hardcore Soft Skills podcast, where you will learn new skills with the help of experts. Today, you will learn about resilience. So, bad situations are expected at any point, and that's a given. So, how do we manage to deal with them effectively? At work, how do we help our teams become resilient? Today, you will learn specific strategies on that with Dr. Marie-Hélène Pelletier, a leadership psychologist, keynote speaker, executive coach, workplace mental health expert, and author of the book, The Resilience Plan, a strategic approach to optimizing your work performance and mental health. Let's listen. All right. Welcome so much, Marie, to the podcast today.
Oh, thank you, Yadi. I'm so thrilled to be here.
I enjoy the book very much because the book called The Resilience Plan because it had so much good information about how to manage our resiliency and more like a skill, which is what we want to address today.
Yes.
First of all, let's get to know you a little bit. So you studied in the field of psychology. Why psychology?
It was just amazing for me to see the amount of information we have and still continue to have from research that if it was known and implemented in our lives would lead to such a higher level of resilience, happiness, overall psychological health that I thought this is just an amazing opportunity. And early in my studies and in my work, I happened to be in the workplace specifically. And even more so there, because then we could have opportunities to be proactive, to invest while we're still functioning, still at work, these kinds of things, to make life, all of life, professional and personal, even better.
That's wonderful. And I'm curious about why focus on resiliency.
Yes, it. I was interested in it, especially so resilience. As let's start with even definition, because sometimes we use the word, but you know,
Yeah.
and there are actually many definitions of resilience. So the one that many are using, that I'm using as well, is our ability to go through adversity and come out even stronger. Okay, so we're going through something challenging, which could be acute, very specific, but could also be long-term chronic, like going through a pandemic or like AI getting into our lives even more.
Mm.
That these are examples. And then, but we grow. There's a learning element, a growth element to it. And so, why resilience? I was interested in it because it has such a proactive element, opportunity to it. Also, because the people I work with, which are professionals and leaders, they are constantly, I mean, they're getting so much done all day, every day. And also at the same time, constantly looking for something to give them an edge, right? To allow them to hopefully continue to bring their best, but also feel happier. And resilience building does that.
And when you talk about the particular kind of person, so are you talking about like high performers, overachievers that
Yes.
perhaps are feeling some stress in terms of what's next, and then it's not enough. What's next? Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, and sometimes people, you could be in this kind of situation as a leader, certainly at any level of leadership, junior, middle, caught in the middle, and senior levels. You can also be in this kind of situation as an individual contributor, right? So and I say this because sometimes people assume that it's, oh, when we get into leadership roles. True, often happens there, and I'm seeing it all across the board. Also happens to individual contributors.
Interesting. So, for my listener who is either a leader or a person who is just part of a team,
Yeah.
so it's a resilience. Is it something that it's not something that we're necessarily born with? It's something that we can work to develop. So, how can we, or actually, how can we measure that we are know that I'm resilient. I'm a resilient person. How can we identify if we've achieved that that level.
I know. And so there isn't like a specific score that you're looking for, that kind of thing. I'll give you, I mean, there are instruments, scales that, 10 questions, to help you see if you're resilient. And usually, but it's the same as if you're going with your own observation of how am I able to decently, effectively go through challenges and grow and be ready for the next one? Or am I facing these challenges and each time it feels like I can't do it. I feel like I have no mental energy to do it. My emotions are down the drain. I don't even know what to do next. So these are examples. And so often the scales that are helping, if we wanted to use that, the scales would be asking, how do you feel if a new challenge is coming forward? What do you tell yourself when a challenge comes? Oh, yes, I can handle it, or I cannot see any chance that I will go through this. And do I know what my next step is? Do I know that I can connect with someone if I have questions or I'm feeling stuck? So it really is tapping into the three main aspects of us as humans: our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors, and how are we in these three ways feeling prepared to go through that next challenge.
That's a great way to identify if we're actually in a healthy resilience level, I guess.
Yeah,
And in the book, you've talked about developing a resilience practice. What does that mean, and how can we develop that?
I know. So part of the essence of the book is to say, okay, we have many things we know from research that we know would help our resilience if we were able to implement them. But part of what I do in the book is bring a strategic perspective, meaning we take your context into account. Because it's great. I mean, everyone has heard in the pandemic, and that was true, very much based on research, that the kinds of things that would help us increase our resilience, there are many, but top four are movement or exercise, uh, our nutrition, sleep, and relationships. Okay, and there are others like time in nature, volunteer work, spirituality, if it's part of your life. The challenge is not so much in knowing, it's in implementing. And that's where the challenge lies. That's
Hmm.
where, if we are strategic, we're going to find the very realistic ways for each of us. So your ways, Yadi, these days will be different from my ways, MH, these days, or 6 months from now, right? They're very context specific. And so, but when we do this, then it becomes doable.
It's great you say part of movement and relationships, and it seems that in our day to day we seem like we're so busy, with family, running from one end to the other, with children, if or caretaking of others. So is that, I guess, the importance of having to dedicate time, allocate time for those things, for relationships, for moving, for good sleep and everything else, daily. So is that, if we were to focus on that alone, could that make us better able to handle difficult challenges? Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yes, it does. So, and we know this from research. So, say, for example, we know that cardio type exercise releases in the brain the same type of substances that antidepressants are releasing.
Mm.
So, and so that's what I'll tell myself sometimes. I'm like, okay, I don't really feel like going and doing my my exercise, and I certainly don't have time. I've got so many other things to do, all that. But then I tell myself, okay, you know what? It's as if I had a free like free from any negative side effect, antidepressant pill here on the desk. So do you take it or do you say, oh no, I don't. So, I mean, ultimately though, it is about making it a priority. And if you think of it, if you know or have heard anyone who is in very senior roles, they are actually doing this. They are because they have to. So they have to. We all have to, really. And so if we're wanting to increase our resilience, it is about putting it a priority. If you're doing nothing right now, so you're saying, yeah, okay, love that, exercise and relationships, but I have zero time, for example, then, and that's part of where I'm going with that strategic aspect, then we need to bring it to a realistic level. So if you're doing zero exercise right now, well, it may be that all you start by doing is incorporating whatever is easiest. Can you walk, get outside, walk 1 minute, come back home? This overall thing took you, let's say, 3 minutes, putting your shoes on and the coat on total, not long, but now you've started. Or can it be a one set of exercise beside your desk if you need to for right
Mhm.
now? It is something to be built on over time. That's not going to be enough forever, but at least it gets you started.
That's wonderful. I like when you say that the people in high roles are doing this, that they are taking the time to do this, and it's probably what maintains them and allows them to be in those roles. So if we aim to strive for that leadership role or that next leveling in either our careers, that we should be able to allocate time, invest in that now. You've
Yes.
and you've also mentioned about being strategic about it. You talk about the strategic resilience plan. What's that?
Yes. It's what makes the difference between the list. Okay, I should exercise, I should see friends, I should sleep more, all this. And if you make it strategic, then you've aligned it with your context. The example I sometimes use, Yeti, is in whether you're in this type of role in a business or not, you'll understand the thing. So let's say a business here has a new product that they want to launch. Okay, great idea. Okay, do they just have that great idea and launch it? Or do they have this great idea and they say, okay, who else in the market is offering this? How much are they charging for it? Who is buying it? Which forces in the near or far future might impact the demand for it? They're doing all this. They're asking these questions about the context. Huh? And then they build a plan on how to launch this thing and it goes. So, same thing here. So, we have this great idea. We want to increase our resilience. But for each of us, we need to step back and look at, okay, what demands do I have right now? You mentioned children. Some people are caregivers of children or parents or other people. That's a demand. That's the reality of your context. Okay. So, quite potentially, it means no, you cannot go to the gym for 2 hours every day. Okay, realistic. What kinds of sources of supply do you have right now? And we go through a number of very targeted exercises. I've made this very concise because I know we need to get to it.
Mhm.
But if you do that, then you're getting to a way to have your plan strategic, meaning it takes your context into account. So if you are in that, say, caregiver role, you also have a very busy job, you know you'd like to increase your resilience, you know you need it. Okay. Maybe, and then we connect this with your values. That's part of where I also invite people to reflect for a moment. But maybe then you'll realize, you know what? I used to love playing a musical instrument. It used to relax me entirely, and I have not touched any of this for years. Well, maybe one of your strategic resilience pillars will be to bring back music. And it may be that it's going to start with just listening to that kind of music a bit more to start. Easy, doable. And over time, you're maybe going to get back to it.
That's wonderful. I enjoy the aspect of the kind of being strategic about it and treating it as a plan. It's a project to
Yes.
achieve your increase your resilience. So how about in you talk about an example here and an acronym, well, like the bear method, like the bear, the animal. Where did that came from? And what is it about?
Yes, well, in the book, if your audience gets the book, I have a fun story a bit around this. But I'm using that acronym because sometimes there will be ways in which we're thinking that just are not helpful. A lot of the time, when we think it's helpful, obviously we're organized, everything works, it's good. But sometimes our thinking, and it's not deliberate, it just happens like this, may not be as helpful. And we tend to think that we have to listen to our thoughts. We don't. But the bear specifically are there, it basically stands for 4 letters. For examples of ways in which our thinking may not be helpful. So we may be thinking B in black and white. So extreme, all or nothing type thinking. For example, I will never make this project on time. Hmm. The E stands for emotional reasoning. So I feel incompetent, therefore I am. Oh, not necessarily true, but that's what I'm thinking.
Mhm.
Okay. A is for anchoring, which is a tendency to just believe that something was true and will always be true because it was true there. Not necessarily the case. And there are so many. This is just one set of four examples where I'm inviting people to take a moment is to step back and look when your thinking is not so helpful to see if you can make it a bit more realistic. And one of the ways to do this, there are many, again, and great books have been written about this too, is just to step back and ask yourself, okay, do I know this, the thought, 100% sure? So if I'm thinking, I'll never make this project on time, do I know this 100% sure? And that will force you to say, well, I'm not seeing it right now, but I might still make it, right? And that more realistic thinking can become useful.
Well, so the B, as you mentioned, B for black and white, E for emotional reasoning, A for anchoring, and the R, I believe, for reading people's minds. That's
Oh,
interesting. Yes.
that is the one. Thank you. Yes, and there are so many series. There's more than 50. So, but yes, reading people's mind. That's another one that often professionals and leaders. Thank you for bringing it back to me. That's one that often we'll think about because part of what makes us really good at what we do, of course, is we're in tune with what is the expectation, what are we, the targets basically,
Yeah.
and that's helpful. However, sometimes we'll take this too far and we'll assume we know what the other person is thinking and that it is true. And again, do I know this 100% sure? No, I don't. And so it forces a bit of a perspective and then stepping
Mhm.
back and being able to be in the more realistic place.
That's great. It points out of how much we live in our heads of like believing on the
Yes.
and the yes, yes. And you talk about resilience as an individual and the things that we need to consider, prepare. Um, I really enjoy the fact that you also talk about resilience at a team level and that it is a responsibility of not just the leader of the team or the manager of the team, but like all of us. How important is it to build resilience within a team?
Oh, very important because work, it's useful to think of our work as a system in which there is us, the individual, there's the team we're in, and there's the overall organization we're in. And all of this is influencing the resilience of the individuals, the team, and the overall organization. But yes, when we think of the resilience of a team, it's the ability of the team to go through adversity and come out even stronger. And it does not mean sometimes we think, well, if we are all very resilient as individuals, then we have a resilient team. Not necessarily the case. It's almost like a different concept. Of course, it will help, but it's also the ability of us as a team. So, together, adjusting together to the new challenges, me taking on a bit of this role because you have to take this one right now, and then we switch back, those sort of dynamic adjustments as we reach goals together. And there are many ways to increase that, but one of the useful approaches is to think of the and we hear a lot about this concept these days, but it's been around for a bit, is the psychological safety of the team. So
Mm-hmm.
the degree to which we can each bring our ideas, even when everyone else just said something entirely different, right? And that is extremely important because that means we trust the team enough to do this. We feel respected. But that also means that we will say it if we have an idea. If there's a concern no one else thought about, we can say it. If we have a great ideas no one else brought up so far, that may be what's going to be the difference in how we implement that next level of the project. So thinking of the overall resilience of the team first as an opportunity to increase psychological safety is a good way to approach it.
What if we are in a team that we are not leading and we don't feel that there's necessarily enough psychological safety? Can we influence that, or is it time to get out of that team?
It depends. It depends. Because like so many things in psychology in general, it is a continuum, right?
Mhm.
And it is probably most of the time true that within the team, everyone can influence it. Okay. But if we are very far on a very unhealthy, not psychologically safe environment, and we are just one of many people here, it may take a long time before we can influence it enough that it's going to feel different. And we may not be able to influence it enough just as a one person here. But if we are earlier in this process, everyone is fairly, it's fairly not hierarchical. We're all at the same level, we're all working together, and we're a smaller group, then your chances of influencing it are bigger. And I would say, if this is your observation that it could be a bit better, then sometimes the first part of the conversation is to bring up this concept to the next team meeting. For example, say, hey, I was listening to this podcast, and there was a discussion about how psychological safety can really be helpful for us as a team, not only in terms of bringing better ideas, but actual just more effectiveness and success. Can we look at ways we're already good at, so we can do it more, and ways in which we can make it even better? And then you start the conversation.
Yeah, that's a good point in terms of getting that started and hopefully not being, shut down, because then we know there are
Well,
certain.
then it will give you good information. If that's
Yeah.
the response,
Hmm.
you may have other things to think about.
Exactly. And you've basically talked all this in terms of building our resilience, and it also emphasizes a lot the concept of burnout, of how it's a common concept that we hear constantly in terms of all the different responsibilities that we have. So, but how do we really, from your perspective, how do we really recognize that we're burned out?
Yeah. So, and true, we often use it in everyday conversation, mostly meaning we're tired or overextended or maybe exhausted. But there is an actual definition. And now let me go to the actual definition first, and I'll come back to
Yeah.
what I was just talking about. So, the World Health Organization has defined burnout as an occupational phenomenon. So, it's not a diagnosis, it's an occupational phenomenon. Three main characteristics. One, we're exhausted. Second is we're cynical. So, we don't think any of this is going to change. And third, it is impacting our performance. So that's that definition. Now, sometimes we will have only one of those. We will only be very cynical, or we're seeing our performance go down, or we're only exhausted, or we're two of the three. It's still all very important, right?
Mhm.
Because it builds burnout is not something that, is not there and eventually it's there. It actually builds over time. It's just that we disregard it
Mm.
until we have no choice. So, but if we listen to the sign, before getting fully exhausted over here, we were getting overly extended. Right? Before getting full cynical over here, we were starting to feel less engaged, less love for what we do. Right? And before seeing the decline in performance, you're starting to see more things fall through the cracks. But usually, what happens when you see all this is you say, but I have to keep going.
Yeah.
You just keep going. And if it's for a short period of time and after that you're going to have recovery, okay, not ideal, but doable. But if it's just like this all the time, then you may need something else, right? Because that is just going to be trending down and that's just where it's going. So it's listening to the signs. And if you're seeing the signs and you're feeling like, oh, well, you don't know what to do with this because it just looks like you have to keep going, that's when I would say connect with someone, whether it's a counselor, a psychologist, your coach, um, a, a peer in which you really have good trust, a good friend, a spiritual leader, a book that speaks to you, anything, but take some action to help you think about what else you could do.
That's wonderful advice and actions that we need to take, like as we listen to the listeners listen to the episode. And as I was reading the book myself, I'm like, yes, I need to take action here and here and here. So thank you for collecting all that knowledge and your research. And if people want to know more about you or want to get the book, what's the best way to reach you?
Yes. Well, you can go to theresilienceplan.com. It will get you to the book and everything that I do. And if you'd like to get the book, you can get it anywhere you usually get your books. I always encourage people to go to your local bookstores because they need you. They need us to go there and buy there, order the book from there. But if not, if online is the easiest, there's always your good old Amazon or other sites where you usually get your books.
Yeah, love that. Support your local bookstore.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marie, for being here on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you, Yadi, for having me.